In this next series of screencasts, we're going to look at local adjustments of our image. The first one we're going to start with is lightening and darkening. And we want to do the same kind of steps we did when we did global adjustments. Well, first we're going to look at overall contrast or lightness and darkness, and then we're going to move to correcting color, and then finally saturation. We'll do the same kind of thing locally. We'll first lighten and darken an area. We'll warm or cool an area by changing the hue and the color, and then finally we'll go in and do any saturation and desaturation areas. So the first thing you're going to do is, I have an image open here. You can see I have my global adjustments already set up. So my major retouch and my black and white points, exposure, color correction, color balance, saturation. So these are done. Now what I'll do is start moving on to localized areas. So what I mean is that these areas right here are all globally. They take care of the entire image. Now I want to start looking at smaller areas of the image and say, at first, are there areas that I could lighten and darken? Now you might say, well, I have no idea what I should lighten and darken. And so there's a way to figure it out until you kind of get a better handle on it. And that is, you can simply go in and we'll make a new layer. So I'll click on this little icon that looks like a square or a rectangle with a dog ear on it, or edge turned up. And that makes a new layer. And it has a checkerboard pattern. That means that layer is transparent, and we're going to paint on that layer. Okay, so I'm going to change the blending mode for this to overlay. And I'm going to call this layer Lighten and Darken. And I can do both of these on the same layer, so I don't have to make individual layers to do this, and kind of makes your file structure look a little more compact and a little more streamlined. So what I'll do is I'll go to my tools palette over here and I'll click on my brush tool. Okay. Now, just like using the clone tool or the healing brush tool, I use my left and right bracket keys to make it larger or smaller. Again, the left bracket key makes the brush smaller, the right bracket key makes the brush larger. Now, watch what happens though if, as I'm doing that, I'm also holding down the shift key. So I'm going to do the shift key, I'm going to do the left bracket key, and it's already there, so nothing happens. But you can see I'm changing these now, and this this brush is slightly enlarging or decreasing in size. What that's doing is that's feathering the brush or making it a hard edge. So let me go all the way with my right bracket key, and we can see that by going up into our options bar up top here and clicking down where we can see the menu for the brush, and you can see my hardness is at 0. Okay? And if I click on the next one, here's hardness at 100. So you see we get a really defined edge here, and here we get a very soft edge, and this is feathering. And that's what we want to do. We want to have a very soft brush, a very as the brush moves away from the center, it gradually decreases in its intensity so that it blends into the next tone. And that's what we want. We don't really want a hard edge when we're doing this kind of work. So I'm going to have this all the way down to 0 like this. Okay, I'll just close this. And then to kind of get a handle on it, you can maybe set your opacity here at about 50% in the options bar. Don't do it in the layers palette, because that's going to make everything 50% or 75% or whatever. Here we just want to affect this one brush. I'm going to say, well, where should I lighten and darken? Okay, well, let's just see what this area looks like if it was darker. And to do that, we look down at the bottom of our tools palette and we see two squares, a black square and a white square, and one sitting on top of the other. This is called foreground and background colors. And you can toggle between these two by just hitting the X key. That moves these back and forth. Whatever color is on top, that's what's going to happen. So if I want to darken it, I'm going to have black. If I want to lighten the area, I'm going to switch it so the white square is on top. But let's put it on black. I'm going to darken it. And what we can do is we can take this area and just paint on it. Just paint on a little area here. And then I'll go up to where it says Edit Fade Brush. And I can drag that back if I want, or I can move it up a little higher. Okay, so I don't get exactly the way I want. So I can do that, and I can say OK. And I can take my move tool, and I can take this area, and I can just kind of move it around and see what specific areas would look like if it was darker, like so. can see, this is way too dark. And what I like to do is do this really light-handed by just having a really light opacity. But this is one way is you can take a very, very high opacity, brush it on, and then draw back with your fade brush tool. Now let me back up here. So I'm going to go to my history palette, and I'm going to back up right about there. Okay, name change, that's what I want. Okay, and I'm going to show you one of the, what I think is a downside to this, and that is, let me go to my brush tool again. Let me paint this area on like so, and maybe I want to see what this area looks like darker or something, so I'll paint this area on like so. Okay, and then I'll go to my image, adjust fade brush tool, and drag this down, and you can see that it's only happening on the last area that I painted. It's working here, but it's not doing anything to this. So that's one reason I'm really not a favor of this. But again, as you're working through your own style, you might find that this makes sense to you and I can get a handle on it. I personally don't. But that's one way you can do that. You can do the same thing with light. You can make this lighter and go in here and paint on an area here. Okay, and again, see what it looks like as you move that around. And you see it moves everything, but you can see what it's like when it moves that, like so. Okay, and then again, you can go ahead and do that fade brush on there. Okay, so now I want to show you the other method, and the one that I use and I prefer. So I'm going to again go back, go to my history palette. I'm going to back up to name change right there and start there. What I like to do is say, all right, let me see what this looks like a little bit darker. And what I'll do is I'll take my brush tool, but I'm going to dial my opacity down really low. I might dial it like 5% or 8% or something like that. And then I'll take this, oops, I have the wrong thing there. I'll take this and paint this on like so. Okay, and just go something like that. Okay, maybe I want to make this area a little darker like so. Okay, now, if you go a little bit too far, let me see, let me go in here and say, okay, that's a little bit too dark for me right there. I can then go to my eraser tool right here, click on that, and I can do the same kind of thing. I can have my opacity at a certain level, and I can go and I can start backing that off. Let me bump this opacity up so you can see this, make this a little larger. Okay, and I can remove all that, so I can easily rectify any changes I want to make. Same way here, if this is a little bit too much, I can just dial this opacity down fairly low and just take my eraser tool and just go over that and back that off a little bit. Again, if I want to make something lighter, I click on this, or again use my X key to toggle between there. Again, make sure I'm on my brush tool, go back, maybe dial this back down and kind of open this up a little bit, or maybe make this punch a little bit more, or something like that. At this point, we're starting to get to be more subtle changes. Again, the overall changes we did is something that we'll probably see pretty obviously, but here we're just going to make sure that we're just subtly making tones work in with each other. And the goal is that you really shouldn't know that you lighten and darken an area until you toggle this off and on, where you can really see the change there. But it shouldn't be obvious. I mean, if you do something like this, let me bump this up a lot. Do something like this, okay, that's going to stick out a lot as you're doing this. It doesn't look too bad. But, okay, let me make it really high. There we go. Okay, now that's not looking that great. Okay, now that's too much of a lighten. It doesn't look plausible to have that area so light and everything around it so dark like that. Again, because there's no direct sunlight on it, so I wouldn't expect that. So to me, this looks a little bit out of balance. So this is you're finessing the image and getting the tones to balance with one another and blend into one another. So they make logical transitions as you move from dark areas to light areas. Okay, so that's how you lighten and darken using the brush tool and the overlay blending mode.